All right, I'm gonna call the school building committee joint town council meeting to order at 6:33 PM. Roll call, Kristen Bagley. Here. Kristen Torres, so I'm gonna call the school building committee
I don't know why we're
joint
getting
town council meeting to order at 6:33 PM. Roll call, Kristen Bagley.
All right, I'm sorry.
All right, so Kristen Bagley, Kristen Juices, Ann Dixon, Anna Desiree Sputu, Alita Hall.
Here.
Christine Kennedy. Here. James Pearson.
Here.
Kim Shockley. Here. Amy Anzalone.
Yeah,
She's here. Mario Carino.
Here.
Don Coward.
Here.
Russ Hill.
Yeah.
Ms. Mills. Ben Marchant. Harold Sands.
Here.
Hillary Lehman. Kristen, do you want to do the emergency evacuation procedure?
Sure, closest exits are at the end of either of these parallel walls. That way as well. And
Those are emergencies too. All right, so the first piece here we've got is, well, everyone noticed we're at Western Property today for a facility tour. I guess Kristen, you'll be leading us around and we'll do a quick tour, and for the public watching, we'll be back soon. And after we conclude the tour, and we'll be hearing some updates from administrators and also from Studio G. So stick around or come back.
go to the comp plan meeting for.
Yeah.
Recording in progress.
Hey, good.
I think we got it right. All right, welcome back. At this time, I will take a motion to approve the minutes of September 20th, 2022. I'll make a motion. A second,
I second.
any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, say aye. All opposed?
Just so everyone knows, this is only one of our first couple of meetings. We mentioned last week, John created a folder online. And he puts the minutes there, he puts the agendas there, so anything you're looking for, we should be able to find on that folder.
I just want to move out of that.
It's a recent to everybody. I'll now hear a motion to approve the minutes of September 28th, 2022. I'll make a motion. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Guys have it. Announcements and updates. I put this on the agenda. If you don't have an update, that's fine, but I just figured there's a lot of moving parts and people talking to each other in between these meetings. If they want to share anything, we have the ability here. So Don, any updates?
Yeah, just two. One is I wanted to welcome Mario Carino from Department of Ed. Many of you have met him, but some of you have not. He's been very supportive of our process and has been a good communicator and helping us kind of get restarted. We got our stage 1 submitted. We're working on our stage 2. He's been just a great supporter of our community. So I just wanted to welcome Mario. We're not going to hold it against him that he's from Lincoln and had the football game the other night. He sent me this text. Go Lincoln, I think. I had a problem with that, but you know, he's been so helpful. I can't hold it against him. And then I also wanted to just share briefly that Russ Hill and I did go to Cranston last week, and we toured 2 buildings there that are under construction. So the first building we went to was the Garden City School. That's a new construction from the ground up. There's no renovation there. That's a brand new construction. And they are closed in, so they have walls up and they're inside, but they're not doing finished work. They're still doing electrical and HVAC and, you know, a lot of heavy construction still. We were able to walk through the building. We saw their learning spaces and their design. We saw their heating systems. We asked them questions about all the things that, you know, you look at when you're looking at new construction. Their facilities director, Ed, was gracious and took us through the whole place. We looked at every single inch. They did a lot of work with their design and thinking about outside learning spaces and inside learning spaces. And one of the things that he said, and I'll say it again, because I think it's my role as superintendent to keep coming back to this, that if we don't make sure that education and improving the academic experience of our kids is a priority, the #1 priority, that at the end of the day, even if we end up with a new building, we may not be, you know, really hitting the mark that we're looking to hit. So we have to have our priorities in line. Then we went to Eden Park, and Eden Park is a school that is like a 3-phase construction renovation. So one section is done, and we went into that section, we looked at it. Christine, I know, has spent time there. She could probably speak to it as well, but it's a space that's completely done, and it doesn't look like any space in this building. There's not a single room in this building that looks anything close to what they have. They use big open learning common spaces. There's common rooms, there's small breakout rooms, there's flexible classrooms where kids are not assigned to a room per se. All their kids have lockers. They put their materials in lockers and then they move from different spaces. Sometimes they're organized by grade, sometimes they're organized by ability or interest. There's lots of flexible grouping that happens there. I did ask her about some of the significant impacts, and she talked about a few things that I thought were important to mention to this group. One is academically, the kids are doing great, but she did say, when you go to a model like this and you do keep education and learning as your focus, you do also have to remember that you have to do professional development for your staff because they've never taught in an environment like that. And if they don't know how to teach in an environment like that, you can give them everything, but if they don't know how to use it, it's not going to have the impact that you want. And then the second thing she said is that her school has an upper elementary section, which is the new section, and then the lower elementary section is not been done yet. And she said the discipline referrals and conduct referrals from the upper elementary section, which is in the new section where there's a lot more flexibility and opportunities for engagement, are very, very little, very small. Hardly any behavior issues are coming out of that part of her building. She said most of the issues that kids are having are coming from the section that it's a little bit more traditional, and kids have to sort of stay in the same space, in the same desk, in the same environment. And then she also talked about social emotional, and that kids who are struggling to regulate are mostly coming from the primary wing and not so much from the upper elementary wing, because there's ways for them to find opportunities to regulate themselves because there's so much flexible learning going on in that space. Russ, was there anything you need to add there?
No, I was very impressed with Eden Park. You know, you're walking into like the future. You come out of the old part of the building and you walk in and you could just see the kids, how happy they were too. You know, it was a different, because I even smiled when I walked in there because it was so different. There was so much light coming in and it was bright and it was
The
very
te-
inviting.
Yep, the teachers all have their desks in one room. It's a big room, but they all have their desks in one room. And so, and it's not by grade level, it's like all of them. So third, fourth, and fifth, it's also their break room, but they do a lot of common planning. So it's not just, you know, horizontal, it's also vertical planning because it goes 3, 4, 5 often. And so they're there and it just keeps the rooms free and available. Nobody owns a space. They all move between all of the spaces. So it's just very, it's very interesting. If we get to a point where people want to go and visit, we can arrange for that. I can't bring big groups of people through. And to be honest with you, I was gonna take pictures of Garden City and they asked me not to, because anything that I would take with my phone would have to get passed through legal. But there's plenty of things online. So they've been covered in the papers and on TV. So if you're looking to see what it looks like, you can literally Google it and probably see what you need to see. That's all for me.
Don, can I ask you a quick question? Does the plan that they used for both of those schools, like, is it a district-wide kind of a plan where they came up with, like,
Yeah.
those schools are gonna look, the other school's gonna look like this? Is it a?
I'm glad you asked that question. So their focus is project-based learning, right?
Okay.
They want to move to a project-based learning environment. And so to create project-based learning, you need certain kinds of learning spaces. So everything they do is around this idea of holding up project-based learning. And Phil will do this with us, but what their architect did for them was essentially take what that focus is and help them design a place where they can stay focused on that and that initiative. And that's where the PD comes in, because it's how do you make that kind of learning happen in the space that they built for them.
Just coming from an outside perspective with a whole new way of learning. My one concern is not every, let's just say we go forth with new elementary schools. Feels like some kids will be learning in one way and some in another. And then starting with younger kids, instead of starting older, seems like they'll go from this learning environment that is supposed to foster all this creativity and growth and emotional well-being to middle school. So it's just concerning to think of those. It's not going to be the same learning environment throughout the town. So even moving from Tyo to Washington Oak could end up being an issue.
So that I asked a similar question. So they have a multi-year plan, not multi-year meaning like 3 years. They're thinking out 5, 10 years. How do you change learning in that community? And other schools are doing it differently and quicker. And Mario could speak to it. Like Johnston has a bond. They're just going to do all their elementary schools. They can do that, but they're going to do all their elementary schools. I think they're putting them all into one, and they're addressing that issue just that way. But what Cranston did is they built Eden Park, that one wing, as their showcase to start getting people to buy into that concept. And then they're going to do the rest of the building, but Garden City's there. Eventually it's supposed to be Gladstone. And then as time goes by, they do fewer and newer. They consolidate. And I think their hope and goal is eventually they've addressed a lot of those issues, at least at the primary level. And then they have to start addressing them at the upper grade levels, but you can't do it all at one
I was
time.
gonna say, I think with any model change, there's gonna be this period where, there's gonna not everybody's gonna, it's not gonna be ideal, but I thought the same
It's-
thing.
But it just seems like we're gonna be going like wide, narrow.
As they get
But the key is
older.
you have to have
instead
a
of-
district, you have to have a long-term plan
Yep.
as a district, right? You can't just do this, whatever we
No.
decide to do, small. You have to have a full plan.
Well, then that's why his message to us over and over again was, you know, everybody wants to do a project and there's a lot of incentives with that, right? You know, you can get a high reimbursement, you can get a new building, you can consolidate, you can save money. He said, but if your focus is just, what's the biggest building we can build with the least amount of money without focusing on big long-term plans and instructional initiatives and training and support, you're never going to have the impact on the community that you're hoping to have.
Well, Don, I also want to bring up, like, in North Kingston, they have, I think it's Stony Lane, where it has that, like, back in this, I think it was like the 70s or.
Open
that
classrooms.
big open classroom, and nothing else is like it. So like, they have their own challenges, because they had this school that was like this. So I remember when Nicole went there as the principal, how challenging it was, because, you know, she wasn't used to being a leader in a building like that. I think that's what we want to stay away from, just if we don't have this like vision of what it's going to be across, we don't have that done because of whatever it be, time. I think it has to be a flexible enough.
And I
kind of
think,
model.
and Phil and I were having a conversation during the tour about basically that's hopefully gonna be his charge, right? Once we get to what the project is, then kind of coming up with that plan and then building our initiative around that.
And it doesn't mean that if some schools are, let's say we had a brand new school that was open classrooms and project-based learning, doesn't mean that some of that professional development can't be spread and some of those practices can just look a little different. The walls are still up, you know, and start to build in other schools, even if they're look more traditional.
And I do want to say something, because you just used the terminology open classrooms, and I think some people are very afraid of that because in the 70s, that was a shift that a lot of people felt was unsuccessful. And Eden Park is not an open classroom setting. They have a learning commons where they have a big space where you can gather 100 kids. But if you look at all the other rooms built around it, they're all traditional. I'm not gonna say traditional. They're all classroom spaces. They're learning spaces that have doors and play, but it's just different. It's a different design.
Are they almost like neighborhood design? where
Right,
They seem like neighborhoods, but they shift and they commingle and
correct.
like learn,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah, we went into one room and the kids were doing some sort of mathematics engineering project and they were working on something and it was just all over the floor and it was just left there because they can do that. And then the kids were off doing something else and they were gonna come back to that project and finish it up, you know, either later in the day or at a different time. And there's small rooms where somebody can pull 1 or 2 kids. There are bigger spaces and the teachers collaborate with each other, which works well when you're planning in the same space. Hey, I really need the big space today because I'm doing this big project. And then the other classroom teacher might say, well, I want to come observe that because my kids would totally get a lot out of that. And next thing you know, and I asked the principal, like, do you have to sign out spaces? Do you have to like reserve a space? And she said, they work it out between themselves. And they said, there's so much opportunity to learn that you don't have to worry about competing interests, that they're all working together.
So Don, I don't know if you know this, or maybe Mario, do you know how much time was spent on professional development before the space was turned over? Like, did they start this a couple years ago?
Like a year in advance, at least.
But then they hit the ground running when they finished that first part of Eden Park. It became their showpiece for the community in terms of what learning could look like, but also became their fishbowl in terms of people observing other people. You know, they bring people, just like we went and visited other schools in Cranston, come to that space and see what's going on there. She said, the principal said that, you know, they have a similar process that we have, that at the end of the school year, if there are jobs open in other buildings, people could leave and go to other places. And she said, nobody's left their building, not people on the new side, not people on the side that's not done. Nobody's left their building because they've all bought into this process.
How big is that school?
I don't know, Christine, do you know how big the school is?
Enrollment.
300 and change?
I don't know how many students are there.
300 and change? The other
That's
thing,
what I was thinking too.
the other thing that I thought was interesting, and they're not there yet because they're redoing their cafeteria now and their library, but when we went through Garden City, the way they built their cafeteria, it's also like a learning commons where people can go there throughout the day and learn. And the way it's been structured, every space in that building at some point in time can see that middle part. Like even there's a second floor and there's like almost, I'm not gonna call it a balcony, but there's a walkway that comes through where you can look down and see. There's the seating that they have, the stage seating where kids can sit, it's almost like sitting on stairs. But the thing that they said is because they're structured a certain kind of way, they only have to run 2 lunches. And some of our schools were running 5, 6 lunches because the cafeterias are so small. They can have a lunch that's K1, 2, and another lunch that's 3, 4, 5, and they're done.
If we had to go to an open plan for learning and development, right, for the teachers, so that you would do that gradually, you could potentially build and then slowly and gradually go towards the goal, correct?
Correct.
So if you have the building vision and then start slowly training as you're doing it, you ultimately will get to that point.
It's essentially what they're doing. Yep. And it goes along with what Kim said about how do you get there? They're getting there one step at a time and they're training along the way.
Well, but to me, that's a proven way of doing, not just in this scenario, but like, corporate wide, people are so like, change is a little bit kind of like intimidating. And I think if you just, this is the concept and you explain it, and you really move it forward and make it exciting campaign, I think people will buy at it. And just say, we're not gonna throw it all in, but slowly, this is the goal. So that we're ready for the next 20 years.
Mhm.
Obviously, the technology changing so much. Change in 20, 30 years. And then
So that's sort of the purpose of us having our meetings in different locations for a little while, for us to see what we have. So when we start talking about what we want, we can see the difference and the comparison. Mario and I were standing next to each other in the cafeteria and we're looking at that space, which I've been in a billion times, empty and with kids. And he just showed me his phone that showed, was it Lincoln? No, North Providence, one of their cafeterias. It's like night and day. What their kids have there and what our kids have here is completely different. I don't want to take too much more time.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, go ahead.
Just to close out on the Cranston, if you go to the Cranston Public Schools website and you go to our schools, it gives you a drop down of all the schools. If you click on Eden Park, there's a link to the school building project. And I think there's a few rendering photos and there's links to all of the news publications and there's photos and videos, I think, that are all linked in there. So if you want to see what it looks like.
Awesome, all right, thanks, yeah, we can include that when we send the Google Drive link again.
And I just wanted to ask, as far as professional development, is there a way to get a handle on like that cost? Is there a way to, could that doesn't get baked in any type of funding, right? Or does it?
Soft costs, it's reimbursable.
So it's reimbursable as a soft cost?
Great, thanks, Don, that was
You're
great.
welcome.
Ben, any updates or anything in particular from your end?
Bill and I met last week and discussed the contract price proposal, and he's preparing something to be submitted to the council for the next meeting.
All right, great, thank you. Harold, anything finance wise?
We did some of the numbers, but we'll get to that later.
I shared in the resource folder a document that Harold had worked on showing the cost to run each building. And it's really just right now, personnel and then other costs.
Non-personnel, yeah.
But once we start focusing in on our project, we can adjust and drill down much deeper. But at this point, it doesn't make sense to drill down because we don't know where.
Yeah, I know we had talked about narrowing it down to 1 or 2 to send to school committee and council, so, and obviously put the financial scenarios with it, so. All right, and we feel like everybody will have capacity to do that, because we're gonna, I think Phil said ideally, he knows what we're gonna start traveling down before the end of the calendar year.
Yeah, well,
Yeah,
when
then
we're
we-
ready, we can.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're ready to define.
It's no shocker that the most of our cost is personnel. You know, after personnel, you're looking at anywhere from 3 to 6% of the cost is the rest of the building. This building, I want to say, is the most expensive at 6%, and one of the other buildings is at like 3%. but we can get there and we can talk about transportation and everything else.
Excellent. Mario, did you want to give any updates? I put a slot here just in case you had any.
That's good timing. So yesterday we announced a new fund, it's known as the 21st Century Technology and Equipment Funds. Coventry's getting 428,000, 100% reimbursement, so it's 100%. One thought is you have until June 30th to spend it, but for this funding, the arts funding we gave you back in May, the facility equities that you would target facilities that are not going to be heavily invested for the bond. That way everyone is getting something. So when you do your approval, we have 80 million or whatever the number is, that's bond funded. We likely want something above that, which would allow for other types of funding sources. Like the facility equity is the second announcement. That was back, I think, September 16th. Coventry is one of 10 communities who's allowed to apply. You have until December 1st. So again, I would lean on him to
I shared with Phil the
start
application.
identifying some things and you can see where the plan goes.
So we're on it.
Mhm.
Okay.
One of the 10, yeah, make sure you got them in there. There's only 10 and 2 communities, I won't say which, are limited to what they can apply for. So, it's really 8 that are going to be jostling for $30 to $40 million of funding. So I think I would actually also oversubscribe. So you likely will find needs that you could probably take about 30 million yourself. But I would suggest.
Each or combined, like 40
Well,
million
so
between 8
It's
or?
combined, but I would, don't just put in $3 million
Yeah.
together. So last year we had 5 communities come in. We only had 12 million available last year. We got 70 million in applications and all of a sudden General Assembly, well, there's a need. Let's give them more money next year. So again, if everyone puts in for, it's not, you're not fabricating needs.
So shoot your shot.
That's right. There's go high. Who knows? Maybe you'll get the lion's share this year, but at least it allows us to report to the General Assembly, hey, these 10 communities put in for $150 million in need and we only have 40 million. That's the funding next year. And then again, you can reuse the applications. Like this, in soccer, is reusing everything that wasn't picked last year. They're doing that and then adding some new ones. So I would suggest make a list and again, pick projects that are not going to be heavily invested in bonds. So that way everyone's getting at least some.
Right, and the 2 or 3 projects we've already started talking about, I haven't talked to Phil yet, are projects that we would have, that were included in our last bond, that we would be peeling off, like science labs, gymnasium floor, bleachers, things that we had tucked into the last one, we peel off and put into this one. And even for the arts one, which I think Coventry has $140,000, we can use it to do small little projects that are really specific to like art or music. Or we could look at a space like our high school auditorium and say, we need lighting and sound. Let's see if we can get some money to support that. So there's opportunities to, like Mario's absolutely right, there's opportunities to kind of address some of our little ones that were last time included that we won't necessarily have to include this time.
I want to make sure, I want to ask one clarifying question. So let's say Coventry submits for 8 million. You're still only talking the state share component,
So
correct?
this one you can get, it's the state share plus, we've added, if you do 15% women or minority owned businesses, you get another 10% on top of it. Plus then you still have access to the other bonuses. So you can get potentially 80% of the facility equity limits. Technology and arts are at 100.
Yep.
So I think those, like the high school is perfect. I think you're not, under no certain scenario are we talking in the high school here. So that might be the one where you can easily find.
And if I remember correctly, one of the components is also to support the community. So if you think about the gym and the auditorium are both spaces that support learning for every kid at some point, every student, but also support community.
If we put in a number of projects for this, does the state decide how much money we'll get or which projects we get the money for?
Well, so it's, so when you look at the applicant, it's like a ranking system, so you can press the priority to the ones you want, which will help you score.
Okay.
Everyone gets something. So we've always given every community something, and then there's a committee of 11 people who debate and jostle through.
I just want to make sure if we don't throw something on that would be great, but maybe isn't necessary for things like accreditation, and that just looks like an interesting project. They don't say, yes, you can do this project, and then we're like, but we actually really needed the money to.
No, yeah,
decide
you would
for.
rank them so that if we're given the choice, we'll go by a ranking. Another strategy is when you apply for projects, do a mix of values. Some mid-sized one, maybe one large one, and a bunch of smaller ones, because when we start going down the line, if we have 300,000 and you're the only, you have 3 projects that are 100,000 each and no one else there. we'll take all yours because we want to give every dollar away. So I would blend it, and I like focusing. Yesterday I did a tour with North Providence because they're going to apply for their auditorium. They're going to come up with a $2 million application because again, it's the one that the community uses, and in some ways, spaces that people see are actually the most important projects because they know the money is invested wisely. No one sees roofs. They're important, but no one sees them. No one cares about windows. People care about auditoriums, and cafeterias, and gyms, libraries. So I would focus on that because you got a momentum.
And then just a follow-up, the funds that were announced this week for technology, Coventry is eligible for those, and that is specifically for CTE.
Just a small piece. So we absorbed $1 million of CTE funds from another office at Ride and merged them in. I think yours is around 140,000 of that, or 100. I'll get you the exact amount that has to go to CTE. The rest can go
Excellent,
wherever it wants.
excellent.
You could do all CTE, but whatever you want. But I think, yeah, I think taking the arts, taking this and FEI together as a strategy will help and minimize the need to offer.
Is there a timeline, like kind of how the project has a start by date and complete by date similar for these?
Yes, so for the arts and for the one that was announced on Tuesday, you have until June 30th, 23, at least to purchase.
Yes.
So those are dead for the arts, but maybe you will lump it together. But yeah, at least purchase, at least have the plan. If you need more time, we always give communities more time. The ones who don't get more time, the ones who haven't done anything, they don't have a contract, they haven't gone out to bid, and then we'll give it to someone else. As long as you have a plan, we've always extended those agreements. For facility equity initiative, we would award those in January, and we'll probably give you until June of 24.
To complete a
To
project?
complete. So give you a year and a half. But again, as long as you show progress, you can always move that. The problem is we give a lot of these statewide grants. You'd be surprised how many communities just use them. It's crazy. So then we just take it and we give it to someone.
I'll take
So Mario, does this have to be folded in with our big bond, or is it something that's running side by side to that?
So I would say it's side by side planning, but in your stage 2, you want to include some level of project. So another community I'm working with, it's $140 million bond projects, and then they did 15 million of capital reserve, and it's whether it's undesignated because they anticipate applying for this fund every year, and other sorts of projects they may get to, or may not get to, but at least you get it approved by the state in the event that the town finds money one year, or some money comes up and you can act on it. So I would approach this that figure out what that bond number is and then do something above it, just get it approved. Doesn't mean you actually do so just get it approved in case things all, who knows what's gonna happen for you.
Yep.
Money might show up and you want to be able to take it.
So that would mean we would have to bond higher. So if we decided as a group that the number was X million, but we wanted to do these projects, we'd have to bond X million plus 20
No,
million.
no, you just get it approved. So because let's say this facility equity issue becomes, so I put a capital budget request for it so to be permanent. So if you get approved, let's say 80 million to make the math easier, and then you do 10 million capital reserves, and you're applying for 90 million, but you only get a bond for 80. And if we have this fund open every year, then you put it in, and maybe one year you get 2 million, and the next year you get 3 million, and the next year you get 2 million. But you need approvals from the state to even access these ancillary sources that may exist. So, but there's no commitment you even do it. The other nice thing about it is, and I think we advise others to this, is if for some reason the bond is rejected, you at least keep that piece. So it's like this effort that if, let's say, spend the next 6 months planning this and we get all approvals and move forward, and for whatever reason, you never know, the voters say no, the bond piece goes away, but your capital reserve piece is preserved. So at least you have something. So if we have consultant fees to pay for, you have the approval to do that. If you still want to do something while we're regrouping, you're not left behind track. So this has 2 benefits to adding something on top of it, and there's no commitment. You even spend it out, like no one's making you do that extra. The last update is you had alluded earlier to the facility condition index score for this building. So one of the bonuses that I think we're targeting is either replacement of a facility with the FCI over 65. At the moment, for the scoring of 6 years ago, you're not there, but many communities have reevaluated because you haven't done anything, their buildings are worse. The question is, how much worse? The four who've challenged so far, who are all beneath it, are now all over it, and all got the 5%. I would recommend that we at least get a quote to see what it would cost to challenge this building, as well as Hopkins Hill. South Kingstown is looking to challenge two as well. So I was planning on at least getting the quotes. You guys can decide whether you want to do it or not, because we want that information sooner than later to influence this plan.
So you're getting quotes for us?
Yeah,
Okay.
so I'll get you the quotes if it seems, and for the last one, I'm trying to, I think, Warwick might have paid 25,030 for two buildings. Like, it's not a huge thing, but 5% on 80 to 90 million. It's definitely worth it.
Yeah, so, and then can you just explain, you know, if we're over that 65, what that means?
Yes, so let's say that Hopkins Hill is over 65, and let's say one of the, and I haven't seen it produced, but let's say one of the versions includes getting rid of that building, and all of a sudden there's a pathway to the 70. But if this building is over 65, and not Hopkins Hill, then if you want to get the max, then you need to do something with this one. It'll help shape where we go.
Yeah.
So I would suggest getting at least the two of them, because just, again, something, keep your options open. You might get, because these are smaller schools, I think, who's the other, Warwick and someone else worked. The other can, Johnston, they paid, I think, 10,000. Like, it was small money to get that assurance. So at a minimum, I'll get the quotes. If you like it, there's a form we sign, signed by the town and by the school district, and then we just deduct a piece of your March housing payment, which is pays for the vendors. And then we'll go on. But I'll at least get you the number, and then you guys can decide. I know they're also in a hurry to find out what that number is. So I suspect in about 10 days or so, we'll have the quotes, and then we'll send an email inside of the next meeting, or however you want to do it. But it won't be, it's not a huge amount. You know, I would say the return on investment for this, it's no brainer. Spend 10,000, potentially get back 5 million.
Okay. All right. Thank you. You have any questions from our end? Good stuff. All right. Phil, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you. So we're going to have an interactive presentation here tonight. So I would like you all to have your mobile device ready. If your service is not that good, go on to the website or the Wi-Fi here and have that ready to go.
So he click present.
Yeah. Let's see.
Which one is it? Oh.
BYOD.
Got it.
Just click through it.
Well, we're going to click through it. Yeah, let's go to the, let's just hit the next arrow button. See what happens. Okay. So I want to quickly go over schedule for the stage 2 effort. Then we're going to walk through a number of scenarios and prompts, and that really is the interactive part. And we can have some discussion. Any live polling that we're going to be doing is anonymous. Okay, so I want everybody to be comfortable doing it. Those at home will be able to do it too as well, and we'll have instructions on how to access that link when we get there. And then we'll talk about next steps. So, Don, is there a way that this can project full screen? This will be important.
I think
for
it
the
is full
presentation.
screen.
It's just cut off.
It's cut off.
So that may be a little bit of a struggle.
Can
Can you make this
Can we
one?
take it out of the presentation mode?
And you see it now?
Can you go, can you move to the left?
There.
Okay, and let's see if that works. Put your cursor like in the white area down. All right, leave it right there, and then we'll see how it progresses. But in terms of this overall schedule, Alita, you asked me for this schedule. All right, this is what I'd like you to reference. Really, for right now, the biggest, most important things are planning workshops as we're talking about these. We really want to start to arrive at a conclusion by November 9th, giving us time to put together documentation by December 9th so that we can come back to you on January 13th with the costs that you will want to be comfortable with moving forward. A lot of these activities will be taken care of, but really, we have a compressed schedule. So I just want to point that out is, I'm going to be giving you a lot of information tonight. No decisions need to be made, but there will be plenty to think about for when we reconvene. And if necessary, I know we're going every 2 weeks. We may want to think about increasing that frequency. But we're committed to this schedule. We'll get you across the finish line. The next several weeks are going to be very intensive. Go ahead, Don. Okay, so I want you to go to this website on your phone, www.menti.com, and enter this code 16675639. And if you can hit that code from where you're sitting, that'd be pretty good. But so I want to wait till everybody's ready. Yep. Yeah, that's all you're going to see. It's just blank. We haven't done anything yet. And you'll be able to see this entire presentation on your phone as well. So in case you can't see something up here. So is everybody comfortable? Yes. I think we start with some regular slides first. So
If we ever do this again, are people watching this from elsewhere able to log in?
Yes,
to
they
the
can.
site and
Yes, they
give
can.
Their opinions?
Yes, they
That's
can.
interesting.
yes, they can. All right. So we'll come back to this if we need to for the instructions, but I think we're all set. Go ahead, Don. So I want to start with some baseline discussion on costs. So we know RIDE School Building Authority, they're currently reviewing their funding formula for cost per square foot. All right. That will be what we use as we start closing in on that December, January timeline. But we also know that construction costs have escalated and current budgets are being challenged. We're going to talk about project cost. And I want everybody in this room, many of you who know this already, to understand what's in a project cost. And there are a couple of components. The first is what we call the hard construction cost, materials and labor for construction, right? It's a brick or a stick. That's what we call hard costs. That is part of the project cost. Another part are soft costs, fees, contingency, owner costs, etc. And then sometimes there are other costs, technology, furniture, demolition. When you combine all these costs, you get to the project cost. And that project cost will be dictated by the formula that's being revised. And we will move forward when we have that. But based on the work that we're doing throughout the state, I think it's important that you understand some actual numbers that we are experiencing in today's market, because it's these numbers that do not align with what the School Building Authority is putting together yet. But I do think it's prudent that you have in mind as we go forward. I don't want you to be caught short. So on new construction, for the hard costs, just one part of that, we're seeing ranges of between $600 to $650 for the hard cost. Renovation projects, their hard cost is anywhere between $500 to $800. And that's about $650 a square foot average. Those numbers have to be factored to include soft costs and other costs. And that's what we have been using in these scenarios. So I want to go to an example.
Phil, before I
Yes.
go forward, I'm gonna go back because some people are looking for the code.
Okay, go ahead. There it is. We can leave it on there for a minute.
Oh, do we have good
Is
Zoom
someone
crowd?
watching?
No, people in this room.
I'm trying to take notes.
I got so
Take-
excited.
They're giving me the sign going,
Oh, I was like, oh, wow, we've got people on Zoom?
we do have people on Zoom. I think we have one person.
I'm zooming.
All set?
I'm all set, thank you.
All right. So let's go to this example. First off, you were asked to send some ideas, and I appreciate that. I read through them, and I actually picked one of them out as an example. So let's say we're looking at a new elementary school for 1,000 students. based on the RIDE guideline, that right now is about 145,000 square feet. That would yield an approximate construction cost of about 90 million, but a project cost of about 105 million. So we want to factor in the construction cost, the other cost to arrive at a project cost. These are big numbers, but I think it's important that we approach this prudently. We have resident experts in the room, certainly can comment and challenge and support as necessary. So let's go to the next slide, Don. Okay, your current assets. This is Coventry. You're bound by like 6 different towns and a state. Very long. Western, this is your projected enrollment in 5 years, and I've simplified some of the numbers to just make it easier as we go forward. Western, this is where we are today, 325. Washington Oak, 600. Black Rock, 325. Middle school, 1,000. High school, 1,400. Tyoke, 325. Hopkins Hill, 325. So just look at this graphic for a minute and just visualize your community. Okay, next slide, Don. All right, here's your first question. You can see it on your phone. What do you think of 5 elementary schools feeding into 1 middle school and 1 high school? Oh,
For the question, just for the record. my answers.
all right, interesting. Next slide, Don. So in your opinion, how do you think the following groups would accept an elementary school consolidation? You can slide that ball over. We have totally unacceptable to perfectly acceptable for the town council, Coventry Public Schools, and parents and community. Okay, all these results are being stored too, so it'll be part of the presentation when we share it out. So it's locked in and we can always reference it.
Excellent.
The only concern of this question is, how do we interpret consolidation? Not just closing it and jam the kids in Washington Oak, or are we doing like North Providence, who built 2 new ones and closed 3? Because I think how you package it changes the answers, right? So if you're doing new and fewer, you're giving kids new schools, who would be against that? If you're just closing a school and jamming them in another one, I can see how.
Yeah.
That's my issue, and with the last question as well. What does that question mean? Is it okay to put 4 into that? Do we need 2? Like, are you implying we need 2 high schools? Like, the question itself, I didn't get the first one. I think this one also is a little more humble.
Absolutely fair question. Go comment. Thank you. Next. All right, so we're going to run through 5 scenarios in this same type of format where we look at the map, we look at the schools, we look at the enrollment. They are done in no particular order. This is scenario 1 where we're looking to maintain current grade configurations and maximize incentives. So what if we closed Western and we constructed an ad reno to Black Rock and made Black Rock 650 students? With some of the reasoning, this is the school with the highest facility condition index. It has the greatest facility needs. Black Rock, you have land, that could support an addition. You are already successfully working with a 600 student elementary school. We're targeting a project cost of about 35 to 40 million. So we'll keep a tally down here for that piece. Next slide. What could that look like at Black Rock? This is your existing school. This would be an addition that would support a total campus of 650 students. Plenty of parking, drop-off, bus, parents, large meeting spaces, maybe a new entrance, almost completely engulfing Black Rock, making it like a new facility. So it fits if you wanted to do something like that. Next slide. Another question. Oh, I'm sorry. Can you go back on? Let me do one thing. We'll go back one more slide. I forgot to mention this one thing. When I close Western, I'm taking the students from Western and moving them to Washington Oak, then redistricting Washington Oak and taking those 300 and moving them to Black Rock. So there is a redistricting component between Western, Washington Oak, and Black Rock to accomplish this move. Okay.
That's an important nuance.
Yeah.
Just because
Yeah,
of the drive time.
yeah. Go ahead to the question.
One more option versus.
And again, this is meant to be quick
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and dynamic. This is where you're not making any decisions. This is not even a really qualified polling because it's only a very select group of people that
Yeah.
have a lot more knowledge than other people who are doing this. So this is really just for you all to know what others in the room are thinking about, but may not want to share. That's all. All right, next question. What kind of impact would doubling the size of Black Rock have on the surrounding community? All right, next. So if we executed that move, this is what your portfolio would look like. Washington Oak, 600. Black Rock, 625. You have the middle school, you have the high school. You still have Tioga at 325 and Hopkinsville at 325. We are maximizing our reimbursement so far. Can we add work to this, right? We're only at 30 to 45 million or so.
Only.
I know, and some of you will laugh at some of the questions coming up. Next. So what's some add-on we could do? Would we consider investing 20 to 25 million at the middle school to put an addition on maybe some of the areas that we talked about before by the cafeteria with the new kitchen, so that we could cut off Guam and demolish that in its entirety? Make some steps forward at the middle school, as you will see, has a much longer plan. And we are estimating 20 to 25 million. Next slide. So far, we invested approximately 65 million. How do you feel so far?
That makes the question of if you're nervous, is it the plan or the amount or a little of both?
Very confident. All right, well, let's keep going then. Don? What's another add-on project we could do? Asset protection at Washington Oak, all right? Maintaining your newest asset that's coming due. We know 20 to 25 years, the expected useful life of materials and equipment. Washington Oak is approaching that. Maybe you need to start maintaining that asset so that you don't find yourself in a deficit. And we've estimated 2 to 5 million for that asset protection. Next. And what about the high school? Do we invest some improvements in the high school for accreditation, phys ed, science, or auditorium? Maybe that's 15 to 20 million. We heard some other things today that may extend this conversation.
I have a question.
Yes.
In the previous slide, with the asset protection for Washington Oak, would 2 to 5 million, is that a scenario where you would go put those projects in kind of that parallel list for the money that Mario was talking about?
The facility equity.
Yeah, the equity.
That's exactly what we did. So,
Only
yeah,
bond
it's-
for what you can't afford it any other way. Go, a strategy I would take. So $2 million projects, you can find, you get creative from that. You can't get creative on it.
I just was curious on if those kind of things were places where we could peel out.
Excellent. Next slide. All right. Now we've invested 90 million on this first scenario. How do you feel?
Wow.
All right, I'm usually looking for 12 to 13 responses, so that's what we got. Good, next question. So in scenario one, $90 million plan, we have some asset protection. We have a like new school at Black Rock for 650. We've invested significantly at the middle school, done some improvements at the high school, but we have to address Tioga and Hopkins. And what are these folks thinking? If you just look at the graphically, Coventry, 2/3 of it is without a facility. Next question. So what do you tell the students and staff, the parents at Hopkins Hill and Tioga? All right, next question. What do you think is an acceptable amount of time for an elementary school student to be on a bus? Okay, next. So we know that the need is greater than what 90 million has in the first scenario, which means there's going to be future work. But we need to be cautious with what that future work is, because you don't want to waste money on something significant if in 7 to 10 years you may have a bigger plan. You could recognize savings when you take Western offline. They could go to Hopkins Hill and Tioga. They could be your focus for your capital revolving funds. But as we may likely learn that the facility savings is probably minimal when you take off one of these schools. Next on. Yes,
One thing, can I go back to that slide? Can I bring up 2 points about this scenario that I just want to, I
yes,
think we have to consider too. So we already have a major traffic issue on 116. Just thinking of Black Rock, another a big school over in that area, how that's gonna make that compound that area. And when you redistrict this the whole town, there's a good chunk of kids over by the high school and moving out to the west that all go to Washington Oak, right? And then there's a big chunk of kids that go to Washington Oak. You're gonna move some of the kids from Washington Oak over to Black Rock. So whether it's the kids that are close to Washington Oak that go over to Black Rock, or the kids that are over on the side of town, like at the high school, they're actually really close to Hopkins Hill, closer to Hopkins Hill. So it might even require like a redistricting almost of the whole town if we were to go with a model like this. I'm just thinking outside because I don't think it's just buildings. I think it's about where everything is. And right now we have a really screwy way that we have a district. So I think that's something I just want to throw out there too.
all right, good. Next. So do you think Tyoke and Hopkins Hills are candidates for consolidation? All right, next slide. So I would think that in the future, you're probably having another bond vote. And it's probably going to be in that $85 to $95 million range. It probably will end up consolidating Tyoke and Hopkins Hill, maybe to a new school. And certainly you'll have improvements that you need to continue to do at the middle school and high school. So I want you to know this is one step on a multi-step effort that will go decades. Next. So let's look at a summary of scenario one, and I have a handout for all of this at the end. So we close Western and send approximately 300 students to Washington Oak. I've simplified the redistricting here. Redistrict Washington Oak and send 300 students to Black Rock. Construct and add reno at Black Rock, like new, for $650. Construct an addition, renovation, and partial demolition at the middle school. Take off Guam. Start aligning the middle school with where it wants to go in the next 10 to 20 years. Execute some asset protection at Washington Oak. Improve select high school spaces for accreditation. And direct any savings to Hopkins Hill and Tyoke until future bond consideration. Now, any of these scenarios could be sliced and diced as we go forward. But this is about a $72 to $90 million. I have 85 here, that is 90. So the range we have in scenario one, which you'll have in your handout, 72 to 90. Next. Scenario two. Maintaining the same grade configuration and maximizing the incentives. What if we close Tyoke and we build a new school on the site of Hopkins Hill? That means you're going to need swing space. I've listed Oak Haven as a potential. You still have the middle school. This component, 60 to 65 million. Next slide. What's the condition of Oak Haven? Does anybody know?
Not great.
Okay, well, let's see.
So just so everyone knows, Oak Haven is where we have our facilities and maintenance department and our technology department. So it's the traditional design that we have at Black Rock Tile in Hopkins Hill with the roundabout with the gym in the back. One whole side is maintenance. Those classrooms have all been converted to shops. So there's a mechanics tent out back on the side. There's a electrician, HVAC, carpenter shop, all down one side. The other side is technology. And then the back side where the gym is and any other space back there is essentially storage. And then the facility around it has this, like I said, this huge structure, which is the garage. It's a fabric structure. It's withstood weather for the last few years, so it must be fairly good. Anything else, Russ?
So swing space is a
It's in tough
challenge.
shape.
It's in
Right.
tough shape.
Swing space is a challenge. We need to keep that in mind if we're thinking about new buildings on existing parcels. Next. So even though swing space is reimbursable, how do you feel about investing capital dollars on swing space? All right, next. This is an aerial view of Hopkins Hill. You can see that the open area, there's not a lot next to the existing school. So building over here, really not possible on this parcel while the school remains in operation. Next slide. This is a new 650 student elementary school. It does fit on Hopkins Hill, but you see it has taken over where the existing school is. And we will want, this size building to have all those features that Don talked about and that RIDE supports, as well as a lot of queuing for parent drop-off, separate from bus drop-off. So the Hopkins Hill site is big enough, but it comes with this caveat of swing space. I'm not too crazy about the sand lot over here, though, this neighbor.
All right, we'll work on that.
Can you go back to the picture that showed it?
Well, it's the beginning of it here, but if you go on Google Earth, this extends. I mean, in the realm of no bad ideas, if you could purchase this property, you'd be in good shape. But this is a large parcel, I believe. And I don't know what they're doing with it, other than creating a lot of dust.
I do have to say, this feels much better because I wanna second Amy's point about 116 being an absolute nightmare for middle school and everything. It's so, and that's just the main thoroughfare for town anyway, so I would really agree with that.
Okay.
This definitely feels better. I mean, Coventry traffic is still awful. It's just, we were never built to handle this many people, but this is, to me, feels better.
All right, well, and we're gonna build upon these scenarios
Yeah.
going forward. Don, next. Go ahead, skip this. So what kind of impact would a new school, 2 stories, have, because it'll be twice the size of what's there on that surrounding community?
Johnson Boulevard.
All right, next, Don. Now, I have an alternative to scenario 2. We could close Tyo, close Hopkins Hill, and build a new 650 student school on the middle school site. And that cost point 65 to 70 million.
No need for swing space.
No need for swing space in this alternate.
Can you put a dollar amount on swing space so people know approximately what that could potentially cost?
I couldn't do it responsibly, particularly if Oak Haven has been cannibalized for other uses.
But in terms of like modulars and
So that's,
rental,
I don't think
modulars are not reimbursable.
But the other scenario would be you could just buy a property. So that's not owned or trade something at the time, and that is reimbursable. That'd be fine. Like I would, if we're gonna go that route, I would look at buying a property as opposed to renovating. As opposed to things which would probably- it would be cheaper to buy land.
And I think if I remember correctly, when you were talking about the middle school in the last project, you were talking about creating different entrance ways and whatnot, so it's not just those
If-
1650 going into that one.
Correct. If you were to place a new elementary school on that parcel, first off, we'd have to make sure it would still work where we thought. But you would then start to think long-term on how that site should operate, because it is unlikely that that middle school will leave and go anywhere else. I look for some properties for sale, but interesting, all the ones that are for sale are past Western over here. Of significant size that you would need.
there's no traffic over here.
Yeah, I'm saying too.
That would have a negative impact.
Next slide, Don.
You know, 1652.
So this,
But at the same time,
This
right,
was-
I mean, middle school and elementary school start and release time are staggered, right? So it's not like we're going like everybody at once. And if we can utilize, up by Foster Field where we can come in and off of Station Street, maybe we funnel people up and down that street and still, instead of 116, I mean, there's alternate traffic patterns that we can analyze.
I say talk though. Yeah.
I do wonder,
I live in Hunter's Crossing, so I'm thinking like, this would be my
so
Cutting through.
cutting through. It would,
at the middle school, tons of people pick up their kids. Is that because of the distance from Western? Like, I know one question on this is, how long of a bus ride do you think kids should take? Most of my kids' friends who live in Western don't take a bus ride. Their parents come and they pick them up. They go to Foster Field to grab them from one side, or they drive around that Falcon. So my concern is, especially with the first scenario, and I know we've moved on, but just something that occurred to me, will more people come pick up their kids if Western? Well, no, they'd be going to Washington, okay, sorry. It's not just the buses, it's the parents coming to pick their kids up that makes for, so say you built a school on that property, I think by the time the buses were coming back to pick up the elementary schoolers, there's like still parents in the circle coming to pick up their kids from middle school, but I'm not sure.
parent queuing is a big deal. And at either the new school or ad renos, it's something we have to, it's a shame, because it's not used very often, right, or for long periods of time, but it's a big deal. Next slide. So in this scenario 2, what are some add-on projects we could do? Well, we could do some improvements to the middle school, but minimal to manage the costs, 5 to 10 million. This may be some warm, safe, and dry projects that maybe could be funneled other ways, but we still want them to be part of the submission. Next. However, in this scenario, you've invested 80 million in 2 projects. A new elementary school at the middle school site and some middle school improvements. Would you consider stopping and then reinvesting those savings from closing of Tyoke and Hopkins Hill into the other schools, and then consider another bond vote in 7 to 10 years?
What is this town's bonding capacity in 7?
So that's my biggest thing is, if possible, I don't wanna have to wait so long between these bonds. Like, I get wanting to just shoot our entire wad shot, to just go all out, but my biggest thing is, I just wanna, because people love to make comments to me about cheaping out, but my biggest thing is I want to be able to do an amount that would allow us to then revisit construction in less than 7 to 10 years and do it more like in more close together and not say like, you guys are screwed, maybe in 10 years, like I want a plan and financials that would support having a bond debt fall off runway that would allow us to do projects sooner after the first one and so on. That's my biggest thing.
We have to factor in though that a lot of the council feedback is that we want to do other bonding projects outside of schools.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but
bond for
my
roads,
point
so-
is that aside, in any event, that's my biggest thing is what allows us to have the financial scenario to revisit bonding sooner than 7 to 10 years.
One example from across the state is hit a home run with the first one because if you look at Cranston, they built the model house in the park. And then all of a sudden the city bonded for 150 million. Wanted more of that. Look at North Providence, who closed 3 schools to build 2, and now they come back for another bond together. Everyone's so proud of it. Look at East Providence, $190 million high school, they turn around 2 years later to $150 million middle school because everyone gets support. And then you look at the reverse, look at Situate, who did a field that caved in, and they can't even get support. That's a $6 million project. And this sabotages them from doing anything.
Yeah.
So whatever you pick, I would suggest that if the idea is to do something like every few
Yes.
years, whatever you pick here needs to be a home run, the best. None of this, like, one suggestion would be to congregate things in 1 or 2 places and not spread it out because you won't get the impact if you put a little bit. I think that only makes sense if, let's say there is no turnaround in 6 years, we look at the bonding capacity.
Yeah.
Let's say there's no capacity in 6 years, then we would approach this differently because maybe it does make sense to invest everywhere if we're gonna have these buildings for 20 years. But if money, if 60 million is available in 5 years, great, it's the next bond. And then we know that in 10 years, it's another 30 million. I think you can take this. And I like that approach, but we would want to make sure that's even available.
Oh, yeah, that's why to me, not just being single focused on one project, I wanna know, all right, then in five years or less, we're gonna move on to this one, and then after that, like, I wanna leave this process knowing exactly where we're headed for the next 10 to 15 years.
Next slide. How important is it to you to touch every school?
With the bond or at all?
I think we're just this bond.
With this effort? Next slide. So that means there will be future work. Maybe you can recognize savings and make those minimal improvements, do the asset protection throughout the rest of the district. Next slide. That means there will be another future bond, almost of the same size you're looking at now. Next. So a summary of scenario 2 for 70 to 80 million. Swing Hopkins Hill students to Oak Haven, maybe not. Construct a new 650 student at Hopkins Hill site and close Tyo, 60 to 65 million. Or construct a new 650 student school at the middle school, close Hopkins and Tyo for 65 to 70. And add to that work minimal investments at the middle school. We know that that has some facility needs. That was our project last time. Those needs did not go away.
And now the roof is added on top of that.
Savings would have to be directed to all the other schools. And we just had a tour of this school. And you haven't heard this school come up other than the first scenario where we were proposing to close it. Anything else after that, this school would just be part of a capital revolving fund until another
major bond initiative? Next slide. Oh, this is a good question. How much influence do you think potential cost savings and/or revenue will influence town council's decision when considering bond indebtedness? We had some conversations last time about the importance of recognizing savings, generating revenue from property sales. How much influence do you think that will have? There's no wrong answer here, Bob. Okay. Next, scenario 3. Now, this maintains grade configuration, but does not maximize your incentives. Why is that? That's because Western is remaining, and Hopkins Hill, we're only looking at an ad reno. I did put a little question mark there, not knowing if there could be discussions with the school building authority about if that becomes like new, would that qualify or not? I don't know, but let's go on the premise that it doesn't.
So do we not get newer and fewer if it's not both?
We're trying to get you 4 bonuses. The 4th bonus, Mario, correct me if I'm wrong, but for simplicity, the 4th bonus is getting rid of your highest FCI. And we're not even sure we're there yet, by the way, but we probably think we're close at Western and Hopkins Hill. When we close Western, we get it. When we close Hopkins Hill and build a new school at that same site or somewhere else, we get it. In this scenario, we're proposing to keep Western. We're looking to do an ad reno to Hopkins Hill and closing Tyoke, which means this would be an occupied construction project at Hopkins Hill. Not impossible, but it means we would not need swing space. We could close Black Rock and do an ad reno at Washington Oak and make that 1,000 students, a lower elementary and a higher elementary. 75 to 85 million. Next. What could we do for an add-on project? We could put some improvements to Western, 5 to 10 million. Next. There will be future work, more improvements to Western, and of course, the middle school and the high school. Next slide. Meaning another bond vote in the future, maybe a little less, because you're significantly making changes in this one. Next. This scenario has construct an ad reno at Hopkins Hill for 650 students, close Tyoke. Construct an ad reno at Washington Oak for 1,000 students, close Black Rock. Minimal investments at Western. Any savings are directed throughout the other schools. This is an $80 to $95 million plan. Next. How do you feel about 1,000 student elementary school? And how do we get to 1,000 students? That's Washington Oak absorbing Black Rock. All right, next slide. What are your thoughts on grade realignment? For example, move the 5th grade to the middle school and the 8th grade to the high school to recognize better utilization.
I feel like that would be a problem for sports. Eighth graders being in the high school, they wouldn't be able to play middle school
Wow.
sports anymore, and they wouldn't play high school sports. So moving the fifth graders to the middle school, I can see, but moving the eighth graders to the high school, I see as a real negative interscholastically. Good point.
You know, that'd be the only example in the whole state that we have in eighth grade.
Well, and I know in South Kingstown, they have a fifth, sixth, and a seventh, eighth, and the sixth graders can't play middle school sports.
There's to me, a bigger difference between fifth and eighth graders than eighth and 12th graders.
All
But
good
they have
points.
fifth through eighth middle schools.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm
Oh,
saying.
okay.
I'm
understood
saying,
the
I'm
opposite.
saying in many ways, fifth and eighth don't feel so bad, but eighth and
Gotcha, I
12th.
agree.
Yeah, I mean, in West Warwick, we had because our middle school and high school were the same campus. I was like in sixth grade on a bus with kids who were 18.
Sharon
Like,
Hill is the same.
yeah, I got an education.
Gotcha, understood.
Well, because the 12th graders on the bus
Yeah.
were the last 12 graders. who
Yes.
Exactly. Next slide. Scenario 4. This is completely outside the box, but worth discussion. Okay, let's do a district-wide PK to 2. Let's move the 6th grade back to the elementary school so that we could reduce the size of the middle school and knock off Guam. That means we would do an ad reno at Washington Oak for 1,000 students. Washington Oak would be the district-wide PK to 2. If we close Tyo, we would do an ad reno at Hopkins Hill to capture 650 of the elementary school students. You would have to do an ad reno at Black Rock to capture about 450 elementary grade students. And you would conduct renovation and demolition activities at the middle school.
So what would be the feeder schools for that?
I don't know. This is just an outside the box thing.
So Western would be a 3 to 5 or 3 to 6.
Western would be a 3 to 6.
Mario, I see a lot of projects doing these early childhood learning centers. Is that kind of banking on the, like, how sure are we that universal pre-K is coming to the state?
There's always a push for it, but some are good. The one Johnson Glen that everyone's referenced. So they have 5 elementary schools going down to 2. One of them is going to be the early childhood, the other one's going to be the larger one. Trying to think who else.
Like, how much do we plan for pre-K?
So can I ask-
4-year-olds.
Yep. In 5 years, there's gonna be 1,900. Oh, we've added the 6th grade. Okay. So we're accounting for too many children for a little bit.
Do all of our elementary schools have pre-K space or no?
Just Washington.
Okay.
All right, next slide. Again, like all the other projects, this will require future work. Next. Another potential bond vote. Again, this one's a little smaller. Next. The summary for scenario 4. Construct an addition to Washington Oak for 1,000 student PK to 2 early learning center. Close Tyo. Construct ad reno at Hopkins Hill for 650 students, grade 3-6. Construct ad reno at Black Rock for about 450 students, grades 3 to 6. Reduce the middle school size since it's only going to be housing grades 7 and 8. Any savings would be directed to Western, the middle school, or the high school until a future bond consideration. 85 to 95 million. Next. What are your thoughts on grade realignment? For example, moving the 6th grade back to elementary. Next, Don.
What are your thoughts on a district-wide PK-2 early learning center? Again, recognizing this is a limited pool that we're asking this question of.
Last person has to say that one.
Next, scenario 5, this is the last scenario that we're going to present. This maintains current grade configuration, but again, this one has minimum incentives, meaning we're only able to grab 3, not 4. Let's start closing Tyoke and an ad reno at Hopkins Hill. 35 to 40 million. We've seen this before. Next. Or an alternate, close Tyoke and do the ad reno to Black Rock. Same thing, 35 to 40 million. Next. So depending upon what you do, add-on projects. We invest in Western. Maybe there's some demolition, addition, renovation here. Asset protection at Washington Oak. And depending upon whether you have invested at Hopkins Hill or Black Rock in the first step, you would exercise some construction activities for ad renos at Black Rock or Hopkins Hill, investing 16 to 25 million. Next. Invest 20 to 30 million in improvements at the middle school and the high school. Next. The scenario 5 summary. Construct ad reno at Hopkins Hill or Black Rock for 650 students and you close Tyoke. Asset protection at Washington Oak. Construct minimal ad renos at Black Rock or Hopkins Hill and Western for 16 to 25 million. Invest in the middle school and the high school. And then direct any savings district-wide into a future bond vote. And this is 71 to 95 million. Quite a range here because we may have other opportunities at the high school, for example. You may have debate and discussion about maybe wanting investing more at the elementary schools. If you don't think in the future, you're going to make a major consolidation. For example, maybe you find a piece of property that somehow comes up between Western and Black Rock, for example, that you could build a new elementary school there. As I've mentioned, any land I could find was west of Western already. Next slide. So this is the matrix. Ben, if you don't mind passing that out, this is a summary of everything that we just talked about. So that you've had, yes.
For option 2, did you look at a scenario? That was the one, the trade 2 for 1. You look at one that includes 3 schools for, price would be 1,000 student school.
Yes, well, that was the example I used in the beginning for the cost. I think 1,000 student elementary school would put us over 100 million.
And then that would be one to look at. The other, while prices have gone up, some districts that have done smaller buildings as a way to combat that. But that would be worth exploring because if you did a 3 for 1, then you leave yourself option 2 is either do a new Western with something in Washington Oak, or you move Western Oak and you end up with 2 schools. But I would always, if you're going to build a new school, I would make it as big as possible. Get as many kids as possible.
I would just say for the scenario 5, I feel like we've stretched ourselves too much without really having that
Win,
impact.
that win, yeah.
Yeah, like you mentioned, you need to hit it out of the park. I don't think anything in scenario 5 takes it out of the park.
And
We
we're getting,
tried to touch
we're getting minimal reimbursement. But the other thing that would be helpful to see, and I know I could just like do the math of about 70% in my head, but just visually, if we can see, you know, after reimbursements are hit, especially on the ones that are maximized, to see what actually the town's share of it, I think that is gonna be impactful to not just the committee, but to the public that's watching this process. Just, because we're seeing 72 to 90, 65 to 75, but I think it's important to see at a 3,000 foot view what that actually means to the town.
Christine had a name for it. Remember last time you said, show
Oh,
me
I want to see the sale price.
sale price.
Yeah.
I understand, yes, we can do that.
But and I think there's another piece of that too, right? Like if we're gonna be closing the schools, there's the cost savings between closing those down. So there's the reimbursement piece and then there's whatever our asset savings.
It's like the project total,
Right.
town share, savings. Like those three pieces would be great to see next to each other.
Additional columns, okay.
Well, and even for the council, how we might be spending our money more effectively,
Yeah, because
not just.
I've heard people say we should take the savings, put it directly toward the bond payment to pay the debt down faster. I've heard you say tonight, take that savings and put it toward the other schools that aren't getting touched. So I'd like to know like which one is better in terms of strategic planning and getting to the bigger projects faster.
So I'm leaving you with a lot of homework
Yes.
and I'm sensitive to everybody's time, certainly this evening. I don't have anything more to say. But if we think it may be good to meet next week, I'm prepared to do so. I will defer to you if it's 2 weeks out, that's fine. But I want to at least extend that opportunity to you. Because I think you have a lot to think about, and I don't want it to go too far before we touch base again.
I do have a question. So as we're going through this whole scenario, I started thinking, so we're concentrating on that side of town. We know there's space available on this side of town. So did we think about maybe moving some of the other schools? Like, what are the options of building up in Western Coventry? Taking some of the people or kids from, let's say, Hopkins and Hopkins got 650 students, right? Divided by 2 is 325 each. Take that and kind of like somehow district some of the kids towards Western Coventry, the elementary schools, right? Then the traffic pattern is minimized because now you're going against the traffic, right? All traffic seems to be going that, coming this way. What would be the cost, like, building it up, better leach fields, better water? Did we look at that scenario?
So, the site here at Western is, as we
Yeah.
just heard, is very limited. And we're on a major road. So there is, similar to Hopkins, we're not able to build new here without displacing the student population. And you'd have to go through the exercise if you wanted to purchasing property, which, again, my cursory review only revealed property that was even farther west than Western.
But you have to remember too that, like, I think about the way that our council and school committee districts are districted, and I have people ask me like, why is District 1 so huge? Like, why aren't they equal in size? It's because it's by population. And almost all of the town is concentrated population on that, like, third Coventry. So, like, while I certainly don't want a kid to be on a bus for over an hour. But at the same time, the other thing that people don't realize is that with the 2020 census, District 1 is the only district, in terms of if you're looking at council-wise, that lost population in Coventry. Everyone else kind of remained neutral. So population it kind of was leaving Western Coventry. So to me, to then direct people in that direction when the population's going down doesn't add up. But
Like, I think about just working families, right? Like if you're driving out to Western, like up against almost the Connecticut border, where you
Yep.
said there's land available, then we're all gonna have to swing back
Yeah,
around
there's no
to
9 to
go
5.
to work, right?
What size property would you need to build the elementary school?
So we were talking about the elementary school for about 650. I think we're looking like 10 to 15 acres. 20, I mean, do you have 20 acres that you?
Oh, I have to donate.
Now, we haven't, I assume you guys talked about this in the previous building committee, but Western Coventry Middle School, that's thing that can be done with that piece of land. We're not interested in ever exploring options or anything with that building, like, be like, what did we ever?
Flat River, oh.
The town hall annex
Oh, okay.
administration across, yeah.
I was actually gonna mention that
River
one.
Raptors.
I was actually gonna mention that and Oak Haven, because those are two buildings that we're not using as schools. But if you look at how big those properties are,
Mhm.
I wonder if they become site locations that are within our portfolio of
Yes.
properties.
So this is the other thing too, is I know you'll get into this as we get closer to one or two projects, but as word has trickled out about this and focusing on elementary, I haven't heard boo from the Tyoke people about Tyoke closing. Again, I'm just going by people who talk to me. The BlackRock people are very concerned if BlackRock closes. They love that one, so I'm just throwing out there. But I just, to me, in terms of, I don't know, that's a decent size. I don't know how many acres that is. I
Which
doubt
one,
it's-
BlackRock?
No, Town Hall Annex, the
Town
old,
Hall
old Western Coventry Middle School. I don't know what that is, but that's one of those things too that I know in the council we've talked about, like, say we ever renovated Town Hall and moved those people from across the street over to Town Hall, like, what do you do with that building? What do you do with that piece of land? Like, I don't know, that's something else that, I don't know if it was considered when you guys talked about middle school stuff or any other.
Talking about a centralized playground at a meeting. Have you talked to me?
It was not at last time.
Cause how many students did that happen?
Elementary school.
How much?
It was an elementary school that had about
It was
500 or
middle school.
600 kids.
It was a middle school before it was an elementary, right?
No, it was an elementary school. It was Washington Oak Elementary School.
And then wasn't it Flat River
Then
Middle
it
School?
became Flat River
Yeah.
Middle School after that. But it was only there for like 2 years or 3
Oh,
years.
really?
It wasn't very long.
Oh,
It was a very short amount of time.
so how many students would you say? Like
It was
300-ish?
small, yeah, it was smaller than, I think it had like 600 in there. That's how big, it was the biggest elementary school we had in town. When they
So-
were,
Not saying you have to solve all our problems, but it's just another asset to think about.
Yeah, definitely, I will.
And even Oak Haven, I don't know how big that property is. It seems big to me. I mean,
But that one's a traffic pattern issue. You have to
is.
go like down and down Yale.
Yeah, that one,
that's true.
Yeah.
we
Yeah,
did
you-
not
you
see
need
that
to
as
ha-
an opportunity.
Yeah, you have to put like a trail of breadcrumbs to get your way back out of there.
That neighborhood already
Yeah.
hates that building over there.
Yeah, yeah.
You'll kill me.
Is there an issue? I mean, I feel like I live on this side of town. I don't go to the other side of town if I don't have to really. I know, right? I stay here, right? But I've been to like a couple of the schools for random things, and is Hopkins Hill the one? Is there an issue? I felt like that's the only place, like, I felt like kids could like walk to school, like when I was a kid and we walked to school, that you could send your
It's got
elementary
sidewalks,
age.
that's
Yeah,
why. It's got
like, it seemed like
sidewalks.
to be the
Tile
only
doesn't
thing.
have sidewalks, the streets are narrower, the traffic situation's a mess.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like,
Hopkins
even-
Hill, Johnson Boulevard has sidewalks.
And it's in the community. I mean, it's surrounded by housing, so is Black Rock.
Okay, so I was just trying
But
to
the
figure out from a
road is
community
more,
standpoint,
the
does
road
that
is
matter? to
more
people?
designed for traffic. It's not like a side street. Johnson, that's like a kind of a.
And you get it from Arnold or from Hopkins Hill.
Yep.
You get it from both sides.
Johnson's is a collector road, so you get traffic on the way to Arnold Road or Hopkins Hill.
I actually think all of the scenarios, with the exception of the fifth one, has no pre-K in it, which I think is not a very, I think it's very short-sighted for us if we don't. do
In
that.
terms of adding pre-K of another elementary school.
More pre-K.
Housing.
We don't have very many pre-K classes as it is right now. And we've been talking, this is year 2, about how we're gonna expand pre-K. But we have no idea how.
Do you
we're
just
gonna do it.
lottery right now or?
It's lottery, yeah. So like the other scenarios scare me because there's no pre-K built into it except for the last one.
Yeah, my only comment would be, I hear you.
Yeah.
Don't get concerned yet. We're
Okay.
very high level.
Okay.
You know, I very easily
But that's
call
good
this
to
a
know.
PK to 5 instead
Okay.
of K5, so.
Yeah, I just worry about also when we bring it as a PK1, pre-K to 5 school, like a big one. It's a huge school. Like, it's a lot of kids.
You have your timeline?
Oh, yeah.
Because the reason bring that up. I think there's something, November, we have some day coming soon that we should be eliminating options.
So I would
Sooner.
I would like us to know where we're heading by like November 9th. Today is October 12th. So I'd like you to keep that in mind as you're planning the next couple of meetings. And as I said, if the frequency needs to increase, that's fine with me. I want to help us get to where we
Let
want
me
to
ask
be.
you this, Phil. Do you feel like out of what you presented and the feedback you heard and what you saw, in your mind, are you like, all right, I know of some definite things to eliminate, or I know of some things that I need to make sure to include, or do you feel like these people are driving me crazy?
Oh, no. So I never feel like that. So
Okay.
don't ever feel like that.
Yeah.
I probably, based on what I heard, I'd probably like to take another shot at a scenario or two. I could probably start taking off some of the outliers. And I could probably come back to you with probably another 4 or 5, some of them the same ones, some of them tweaked. But I'm really gonna look to you to try to at least get me from the 4 to 5 to the 2 to 3.
Do you want me to collect feedback again to give you?
That was very helpful because I was able to read people's comments and see, I didn't want to outright answer each one, but I figured, oh, well, I could filter
Yeah,
it
full
through
disclosure,
this.
I took word for word what people said, put it in like a table, and then just tossed it to him. So I didn't summarize anyone, I didn't mince any words, I literally took exactly what everybody sent me and sent it to him.
Yep, and I took that information and saw how this person's comment could fit into this scenario, this one's in this one. Maybe I needed to craft a scenario that grabbed a couple, and that's what I presented to you today. So soliciting feedback and getting it back to me is a great way of doing it.
Yep.
I think you have this presentation.
Well, I don't have it with all of the.
So before we leave, I will show you how to save it.
Okay.
And you can download that presentation so that if people look at it, they can see the results that
Because I'll put that in our folder.
were there. And then you have some time to look at it. And I think between the summary sheets, that matrix and the presentation, you could certainly craft some questions for me.
I did notice with the polling, there was very little resistance to the pre-K to 2, district-wide pre-K to 2 concept. So I wonder if there's a way to build off of that with.
So can I ask you a very frank question?
Yeah.
What do you think your chances are of pulling off such a major change to your approach, and maybe it's not, by when we submit this in January? I don't want to go to, here's what I don't want to do. I don't want to go to town council and say, hey, we're going to do a district-wide pre-K. All one town council member has to ask me is says, oh, where did that come from? Who's leading that charge in the district? Does Don have a plan for this? I feel that we would be exposed and vulnerable. I don't think any grade configurations are in this timeline. I think you've got too much to do first before you dump something like that on the community. That's just my personal opinion. Others,
Passing the bond and consolidating is enough, never mind great configuration and all the redistrict,
I'm sorry, I'm just gonna say I disagree, and because I think it's going to affect everybody by that. So when you make a pre-K to 2, it's not like, well, these schools got this and this school got that. It's- We're reconfiguring our town for cost savings, it's good for schools, for kids to be, like, have teachers, all pre-K teachers together, K teachers together. Those kinds of things are good moves.
I don't disagree.
Right, I think we could be able to sell it that way, that's just my.
but I don't think you could do it in like 8 weeks. And that's really what we're down to doing, because
Well, here's where I think you could, because change is hard and no one wants change. And they especially don't want change to the status quo. So if you're gonna talk about reconfiguring, K through 6 or 8, well, K through 6 really, because you got the middle school and the high school, they're already town-wide, everyone goes to that one point. You could get everyone else over the hurdle with having a pre-K to 2 because you're offering pre-K that is currently not available now. And I think people would opportunity more than they would care about the inconvenience. So you're giving it, it's a give and take, it's a softer transition. And with having a pre-K to 2, maybe then you start looking at that 3 to 6th grades, like, do we really need 4 schools? You could have a consolidation where you just have 4 schools, pre-K to 2 or 3, 4 to 6, 7 to 8, 9 to 12.
Yeah, I
whatever.
want to be clear. It's not that I'm against all the change. I think it's great and it doesn't bother me. I just want to make sure that we're, like you said, you've got 8 weeks to make the sell and we're gonna have to be really buttoned up on the messaging and that's the thing that's just super important when you have all those moving parts.
Pre-K hasn't really been a part of the community narrative or conversation yet, so.
Now, there
Wouldn't
is
it be
one,
great
there-
to introduce it?
Oh, yeah.
well,
I mean-
let me just go back to the logistics of this one thing. We're shooting for a February 15th submission. I don't know what your plan was for any bond vote if you were successful through council, but you do have to September 15th date to make that submission if you want to change the narrative or modify the narrative. It just means when you make that submission in September, you are then on a very short time frame to have your bond vote, likely November. Bring your construction manager on board because we do want to make sure we still maximize the incentives that we can. That's doable. There are communities that are going to be doing that. I'm not advocating for that, but that's just another option you have. If we want to explore this curriculum component.
Yep.
And you want time to develop it and present it to the community, you do have that option of not going February and going September.
I'd like to resurrect an old opinion from the last building committee about just a pre-K through 2 school. I think it's a narrow demographic that doesn't necessarily touch the whole community. And I like the idea of adding pre-K to elementary schools, but I don't think having dedicated pre-K through 2 in just like one building and that being like the project or a huge chunk of the project, I just am not sure that you can sell that to Coventry as a whole.
We live in a no first vote community.
Right.
I've never seen anything that comes up as any type of a vote pass the first time. Excuse me.
That was too much of a coincidence.
I know, right?
There's a
I
reason
know.
why,
Well-
there's a reason why Elite is going down this path.
Well, yeah, because that's where a lot of the, sorry, I'm like choking, don't worry about crying, guys, what's wrong with me? But, I mean, I really think we need to get some type of community feedback before we lock in
Yep.
to a project that we put Phil on. I don't know how we get it, but we gotta start knowing what people are willing to even explore or entertain further before we decide, and it's just a disaster.
Yeah.
Is there no way to be able to somehow do a survey to, you know,
So
the
we,
school?
we did a survey in another community, almost 700 people responded. That was the highest we've ever had. We did not do that in Coventry last time. I am happy to develop a short survey, distribute to make sure everyone's comfortable with the questions and it's phrased appropriately. And then orchestrate a mass email or distribution to the schools, so put it on a piece of paper, it goes to the parents. And we can let that run for a couple of weeks. We can quickly do that. That's a start, at least.
I just
Someone's gonna
feel
say
like
they didn't know something was happening.
Yeah.
I think that's really, really important, so that,
Agreed.
you know, everybody somehow is part of it and gives us the true feedback.
So should that be our next step, is to develop that before we even?
Because they'll be anonymous,
Shuffle
right?
up.
You could do it anonymously, so people could be completely.
Oh,
open.
it's completely anonymous. It's
So It's not
very
requiring
easy.
of give me your name, so it's like, here's a simple survey, these are the
It's all done.
questions, deploy it.
I would think we might narrow it one more time
Yeah.
before going to the survey though, just because this could be overwhelming to sit, like, I think
Oh,
when
that,
we push out a survey, it can't be long, it
Nope.
has to be like really like simple,
Right.
almost like yes or no.
One of
like-
those
General
little, like,
concept
Google
questions
Doc,
too,
Like,
like
answer
those,
these
uh,
couple of questions.
Yes.
and-
You know, what are your thoughts, what are your feelings on it?
Yes.
Pre-K to 8, on a, you know, pre-K in every school.
District.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Where would you pick to spend large dollar? And again, I think we bypassed it last time because I think we all kind of no brainer. We're like, well, it's the middle school. Every kid goes to middle school, so everybody was gonna vote. We'll vote yes, yay! Like, but that was probably short-sighted
Yeah, we
thoughts
need to
too,
hook
right? So-
parents in throughout this whole thing
Yeah.
because we're, and this goes back to our budget votes. Like, I know people are standing at bus stops and they're like, oh, did you go vote for the, no, I'm not going. It's like, you know, and their kid really benefits from the schools. Like the kid might have an IEP or something. It's like, you're, what's like, your kid benefits, you know, incredibly from the school and you're not gonna take the 2 minutes, like, you know, so, yeah, I mean, we
I'm
just,
sure one of the questions too also leads to like, you know, like if a lot of the parents that have elementary kids, like, you know, imagine your kids at middle school, right? How would you want to see your kids at middle school? So it projects to the future
One
and
thing,
ties
just
along.
to add, I'm in favor of this, that there's a trade, there's a, the moment you send a survey, it's open-ended, the timeline's up to it. right?
oh, yeah.
So I think that, which is okay, I think that this is a real conversation, that if there is that other path, we've identified as a trade-off, that you lose one reimbursement point, not the end of the world, right, you're still gonna be at 68.2. But the moment you start surveying, people, this timeline is impossible.
If you
Well, I
curtail the
think-
timeline, you give them a, you know.
Or you do a really narrow survey
That's what
where you
that's-
pick two out, like,
Yeah.
but that may not be what some want, where you send out these are the two options for thinking, that's your feedback. But the moment you do community engagement, if you only open it for 2 weeks, you get criticized because you didn't do it enough. Other
Yeah.
communities do it for months. So either you go all in, you might do a whole roadshow for 8 months, and that's a different timeline than what we're talking about earlier today, that November. But right,
That's
you can't
gone, yeah.
engage the public,
You're not
In a
in
meaningful
February,
way,
you're
yeah.
into September.
you're in a different time.
And then I want to go back to what Alita said. You said there's no bond that will pass on the first time. So I don't know what your voting schedule is. This is for another discussion. Let's say you submit in February, right? You may decide to do a special election in the spring. In case it fails, you want to be able to grab another one later. If you wait until September to submit, that's it. You can certainly do the bond vote before, but your community probably wants to see that this actual project is like approved.
You almost say
Like
the
a real-
survey, tell the scenario. All right. And, you know, like,
And really, a survey is more of a public education tool than it is a public decision tool, because until they take the survey, they're not thinking about it. And so you're provoking them to think about something they never thought before.
it's basically saying, do you want to gamble the incentives for public input? Or that's what you're taking a gamble on incentive, meaning incentives. Or max incentives, if you do the survey.
And then depending upon what option this goes,
Mhm.
you may not be maximizing those incentives.
Yep.
So I don't think all those need to be solved now. These are all great topics. I think that the first task is, I gave you a lot to think about. Think about it, communicate back to me so I can come back to you and with this funnel. The survey thing can still simmer out here as an educational tool as we get closer. But I want to think about when your next meeting is.
I was just gonna say, is next Wednesday realistic for this group? I mean,
I personally can't do it, but I'm going to try to stay.
yeah, I'm available. Let me just see. Kristen, I was next Wednesday. Yeah.
Next Wednesday.
Alita, is that no, you said?
No, I can't do next Wednesday.
Christine?
6:30, right?
No, it would be October 19th. Oh, 6:30.
Tentatively, yes. I do have something on the schedule that'll be up against it, so
Okay.
if I'm late, but I'll still be here.
All right. Love that. Amy? Mario? You have a TY with Christine. Don?
I am, yes.
Russ?
Yes.
Ben? Harold?
Yes.
Alright, so I just, obviously, people who aren't here, Kristen and Kim, so that's more than a majority of the committee can do next Wednesday, so we'll just have to work on a quick turnaround for the agenda tomorrow.
Tight agenda, small tight agenda.
Just keep it to this. And
where
then,
we're gonna go.
oh yeah, where do we wanna go next? Hopkins Hill probably, that one was talked about the most.
Ohio.
And then, what deadline do you want for me to solicit feedback to get to you?
If you could get it back to me, give it, I think everybody benefits from having the weekend to mull over these things on Sunday morning. So you get it back to me, preferably like Monday morning.
Yeah.
And it can be in the same format you sent
Okay,
already.
For a Wednesday meeting, the agenda just needs to be posted by the Monday evening.
we can probably do it sooner. 'cause it's gonna be-
If it's gonna be a short agenda, that should be really easy to do.
So October 19th, 6:30, Hopkins Hill.
Think
We'll
Hopkins
arrange
Hill.
that.
Can you get us in?
Hmm?
Do you know somebody who can get us
Back in
in?
I think
civilization.
so. I'll make a call.
And feedback to District 4@coventryri.org by Monday morning the latest. If you could do Sunday night, that would be even better, so that I can package it up. Great.
This was a good meeting, and you all should be very proud of yourself. We're moving forward, which is good.
Any final words on any of this? Any questions? Great. Might we just throw up the timeline one more time? That would just, I think that'd be good for everybody to see.
Was that in the
Yeah,
presentation?
it's in the presentation. It's like the second. Well, you can go there and then just keep hitting back. Right there. So this has some things that Studio Jade is going to be doing, and anything we need from you, we'll get like updated asbestos, radon reports and stuff like that. I'll work with you to get them. But like I said, no later than 11/9, we want to wrap up our planning workshops.
Yeah.
So that we can move forward with any technical stuff, as well as the work that we need to produce a level of documents that we can then send out to our third-party cost estimator to validate those numbers that I've shown you thus far.
Mhm.
So we want to send that out around the beginning to middle of December, so that when we come back to you with our submission in early, mid-January, you have the scope of the project, the schedule of the project, and the cost of the project.
Yep.
And that's really what you want to start making. You want, the school building committee will make a recommendation to the school committee, and the school committee will recommend to submit, and the town council will recommend to submit, and then we will gather whatever we need to so that we can make that submission on February 15th. And as these dates down here, you may want to say, hey, Phil, can you come to a town council meeting before the one that they vote on?
Yeah.
And give a presentation, so it's not, cold call. Say same thing. Can you come to the school committee before, the month before, or the meeting before we vote, and give another presentation? And then the school building committee, we're meeting anyway, so.
one thing I thought about, and I don't know if you have enough information, Phil, but I think too, with these other scenarios, to know what from facility equity money could be, you know, how you put extra work or other additional improvements, like if we could denote like what facility equity money could be spent on that. I think that would be helpful. And then also, just thinking of action items too. So Mara's gonna do the quotes for the FCI or reval. And then maybe you could share with Phil the facility equity kind of rules or amounts, or that would be now. I don't know if you might want to relate more detail about the like the gym or what things would be more appropriate for that.
Yeah, we didn't do the
From your
application
capital
yet, but
list.
we've been thinking about it, and our list is basically our capital list and looking at some of the things we were looking to do in the last construction initiative.
Okay,
One thing I want to make sure everyone will be prepared for, we will likely be making a stage 2 submission that is like maybe 100 million. But no, this is why I'm telling you this. Our application is for 100 million. We want that approval from RIDE for 100 million so that you can pick and choose what to bond for, what to maybe to do through another avenue. I want to make sure everybody in the community knows that, and Mario, back me up if I'm wrong on this, that our stage 2 application amount does not equal your bond
what's going
amount.
on with that one?
Yes.
Okay.
Everybody needs to know that.
Yeah.
Every time we need to tell them, we're submitting for more so that we have approvals in place. That does not mean we're bonding for this. So hearing nothing, that I believe what I told you was correct. And that's why I wanted to make sure you all know, because you're going to hear me say numbers. You're like, well, what are you doing? We said this. Bonding amount is not going to equal what our submission amount is. Now, we can't get crazy, right? Can't submit for 400 million.
Yeah.
And, you know, so I'll work with Mario and his group and Don and you to make sure we're all on the same page. But everybody needs to keep reminding people when they say, oh, we heard on TV it's 120 million. No. That's the application. That's the requested amount. It does not equal our bonding amount. We just need to figure out how that messaging works.
Okay. Right, so I think 7 was kind of a state, item 7, it seems like it's duplicate, but we haven't done that. Review of upcoming project deadlines, we did. Any public comments? Going once, going twice, 3 times. Comments closed. Can I have a motion to adjourn at 9:07 PM?
Make a motion to adjourn. What did you say?
9:07,
You said the
second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned.